Welcome back to another episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. My name is Steph, and I will be your tour guide for this world of mine. For today's episode, I will be riffing with my brother Alex Santiago. He is at SOSAIC on Instagram. This was the first time I've ever spoken to Alex, and I found such an inspiration in him. He is a father, an artist, a husband. He was born in Puerto Rico, so he has that bicultural experience. He is a coach, a speaker, a branding and advertising professional. And the way he mixes all of his experiences up into the person he is today, doing the work that he does in the way that he's doing it, which is working on advocating for a better, more holistic way to do and engage with the fruits that come from our creativity, especially through branding and advertising. This conversation was such a banger to close out this third season of the podcast. It has been a beautiful experience for me. I've got to, but through these conversations and the reflections that come from them, I've gotten to know so much more about myself, my way of communicating, my curiosity, my creativity, and needless to say, it has been such a beautiful experience, and I am so grateful for you, yes, you, because together we make this all possible. And thank you to the people who have reached out with feedback, reviews. If you are on iTunes or Apple Podcasts, please hit those stars. Do your girl a solid and help the content become more visible. Or just straight up share it with somebody that you think would vibe with it. And thank you to all of you who support my work, whether it's through purchasing my art or hooking me up with Whole Foods gift cards and all of the other beautiful gifts and offerings that y'all share with me. Okay, well, I guess the only thing left to say is this will be the last guest episode for this season. There will be one more episode, and that will just be me reflecting back on season 3. I did that for season 2, and I thought that was pretty dope. I really enjoyed it, so I'm going to do that again. And after that, I am going to take a breather. Like I said, this babe's been cooking full of love for 9 months, and it is time to enjoy the summer. I have a couple adventures planned this summer, early fall, so I will come back with hopefully some really good stories from the road. And I know that I've spoken to a few people about being on the podcast for next season, and it sucks that I'm gonna have to wait to talk to them because so much of this information I am just dying to taste. But I also know that I can really use the time off. I have been craving time in the studio, and as a matter of fact, have been spending lots of time in the studio, therefore not really tending to a lot of the businessy side of what I do. But I am super excited because I've been playing with this double Ouroboros symbol for a really long time now, as well as messing around with the subject of archetypes. I initially, in 2019, decided I was going to have this art show for archetypes, and that would be my next project that I would focus on. Actually, it was like 2018. Wild. And this was heavily inspired also by the album Wyoming by Kanye. Just want to throw that out there. Super weird, but subject of archetypes has been cooking for a really long time, and it has been one of the projects that I've been so obsessed with, and yet I keep getting forced to put it on the back burner because this is something that will not be forced through. So I keep sacrificing time with it to create other stuff, such as this amazing podcast. And for a long time, I thought maybe I was just distracting myself, not being able to commit to actually building a whole body of work and pitching an art show and going through the whole dog and pony show that is the art world. So I continue to brainstorm how to bring my vision forth, and it's something that I'm still ultimately working on, big picture, but I have a good idea of what things I want to experiment with. And this new, I don't want to call it mini art show, but I have this new, I want to call it an art drop that I came up with, and it is called 1-800-FREEDOM. It is inspired by my exploration of archetypes inside of me, aka in my own human experience, human journey, aka my life. And this one focuses on this archetype of freedom and what that means to me, how that shows up in my life, what symbols are related to it. And one of the big things is the 55th gene key. So anywho, I'll be working on that. I also joined the Fit for Service Fellowship, and I will be doing lots of work there, which I am super excited about, but also very anxious about because it's a bunch of work that it's meant to be as fun as it is to put me outside of my comfort zone. So again, lots of good lessons to reflect on for next season. And yes, of course, I am always working on Mindfully Creative, which is my avenue where I share my love for creativity with others by helping you nurture and empower your own creativity. And the reason I believe that's important is because we are all artists creating the art of our life. And when we become conscious of that, we are able to really focus on the intention of what we want to create. And doing so helps us bridge the gap between our dreams, our desires, our passions, and our fears, our weaknesses, our shadows. So if any of that tickles you the right way, you know where to find me. All my portals on the interwebs at Rabbit Legion, Mindfully Curious, Mindfully Creative. And without further ado, here is the conversation with Alex Santiago. So grateful for you all, for this conversation, and everything there is to come. Big love, everybody. Alex, welcome to Mindfully Curious. Such an honor to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. Been looking forward to this one.
Likewise, my friend. So I prepared you before we came on. I like to always start the conversation by encouraging the guests to share their backstory, because to me, stories are so valuable, and I love that we get to share ours here. So give us the cliff notes. Go as deep or as shallow as you feel like going today.
Absolutely. Well, I guess I'll start with what matters the most. I am a father of 3. Been married now for 15 years. I got to count there. We're close to that celebration time. So about 15 years in, I'm a creative strategist. That's how we met online. I'm a creative strategist, and I have my own consultancy and branding boutique here in Florida. I have been doing this for 17 plus years. I have been an artist even longer. You can see behind me, musician. Music got me into marketing, which is a really interesting kind of backstory about how I ended up where I'm at professionally. But I've had so many different journeys. I've done so many different things, from hustling myself to the ground to losing myself to getting my health down to shit to finding myself and, speaking about it. I speak about art, music, culture. I speak about music and purpose and mental health. And I'm here just trying to have a fun conversation with a new friend and hoping that somewhere along the way, somebody gets something meaningful out of our conversation.
Hell yeah, brother. I would love to start with sharing with you what I heard. What I heard is that you are a man of many, many talents and many interests and many gifts. And a lot of things have happened in your life, but it sounds like it kind of all started with art in a way. Like before there was a father and the husband and the businessman and the hustler, there was I'm curious about what is the first art, like what is the first way that you engage with your creativity?
No, that's great. That one has a direct line to my mother, who was a self-taught artist. She could draw anything you could imagine. She could take a box of crayons and turn any coloring book into a work of art. So early on, she was the direct connection to that space. I started, trying to obviously imitate her as a child, 6, 7. And during that time, my stepfather was also a musician. So I started learning from him to play congas and bongo and percussion in Puerto Rico when I was growing up. So that is the earliest access that I had to that. He used to perform live. So I got to see that life, right? Being in rehearsals. My stepmom had me very young, so I got to experience her going through her associate's degree. And she was in the chorus during that time in the junior college that she attended back in Puerto Rico. And I also got to see a lot of that back end. So very early on, I got to experience that. I got to kind of be around music, musicians, artists, and performing. So by the time that I was 11, after seeing that, learning, imitating, I actually started taking dance classes. And that was the first time where training actually came through. There's probably dozens of videos of little Alex dancing when I was coming up. And that was always like the thing that you saw, little chubby Alex dancing his ass off everywhere. And that was the first time that I really started getting that education. And first time that I experienced learning choreography, learning technique, and then performing. And once I started performing, that's when the real bug in my life hit me. And it really became being in front of 1,000 people, 3,000 people, 5,000 people. That's where, like, I always said the drug really hit. And in a weird way, I've always, kind of like hungered for that, moving people in an audience. And from there, I moved to the States when I was a teenager, and I actually found out that I never thought of my dad as the creative type. He's always been the businessman. And I actually found out that he was DJ back in the day, that he was actually with his best friend. They were actually working and doing some really old school, vinyl LP, like math mixing, all of these things, doing mixtapes beginning the late 80s, late 80s. So I came to find out that the music side of things was actually, my pops was very much. And this quick story, this is the craziest shit. So about 6 years ago, my dad came over. He was out in Tampa Bay, and he hit this old school record store, and he, like, super stoked, shows me this CD from ECE. It was ECE's first album when he went solo, right? Not NWA, but ECE by himself. It was like this remastered CD. And he was like, look what I found. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, what is this? And I always like, I knew what it was, but I'm like, what are you doing with this thing, And he was like, that was my nickname in high school, ECE, because his name is Elvin. And I was like, wait, hold on, what? So I've since then given my pops props, because he loved the NWA. So he had an ECE album, he had an NWA album, it's remasters. I have been obsessed with Dr. Dre my entire life. Like, my entire life, Dr. Dre has been a person that I've always looked up to. And come to find out that I was probably in my mom's belly listening to my pops, like, mixing, NWA music back in Puerto Rico. And that's actually, like, that was an incredible kind of blossoming moment for me, because, again, we grow up and we have perceptions and we have biases to our relationships. And I realized, I'm like, holy fuck, like, this person, like, I thought I fell in love with Dr. Dre, when I was 13 years old with, Chronic 2001 came out, and I was with my uncle listening to music. And little did I know that, like, my pops was, like, listening to this music in Puerto Rico, which, I mean, really think about how unlikely that is. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
So anyway, so that was a huge moment. So then when I get to the States, I basically, performing and dancing, I kept doing it here. Then I found music, rock and roll, singing, and then I started becoming more of a recording artist. And that world then directly got me into marketing.
I love this. So first, I want to share that I am obsessed with creativity, and the technical definition of creativity is bringing up ideas into the world, like literally manifesting them, but ideas that have value. If you look it up in the dictionary, that's what it says. But through a lot of scientific research, we found out that creativity is kind of like the chicken and the egg with flow, which a lot of people that are into bio optimizing your processes, normally business people and athletes, to an extreme. Exactly. But creativity really is just in bed with flow states, like, all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so exciting because creativity, at the end of the day, at a neurobiological level, is weaving. Because we have two sides of our brain, the left side and the right side, and they say one's more creative, one's more analytical, And you were talking about your pops mixing math and, just like thinking about how he's very technical, but he had the music in his heart, and he was able to apply and weave all of his technical skills that he has and, like, weave them with his love for music. And that's what I love the most about creativity, that it's like a weaver. And I was saying about the brain, you have those two sides, and they say, oh no, are you right brain or left brain? But when you're creative, you're both, because literally they've done tons of scans on creative people, and the corpus callosum, the part in the middle that kind of joins the both, gets thicker the more creative a person is, because you're weaving, literally like weaving extra brain parts to connect the both things. So just wanted to share that. So beautiful, scientifically proven, and now we can demonstrate how this showed up in your life.
That is so awesome. No, yeah, that's incredible. Which is funny, because that's my career, and and I made music be part of my therapy solution. I didn't touch a guitar for 8 years, and I was just literally losing my shit. So it's interesting because that has been my journey thus far in my 20s and 30s. It is leveraging both, right? And been doing a lot of classes in the last few weeks. We got a program going on right now, and we're teaching young professionals coming into this virtual agency program that we're working on. And a lot of conversations early on is about strategy, right? And like that's the thing that everyone says is you're using both sides. And I think people forget that. People forget that you don't have to pick one, right? Like you just have to allow yourself, right? Like you need to allow yourself to find the path, exploration, call it a test. You can put a label, whatever makes you comfortable, but it's just allowing yourself to experience and allow yourself to find the things that move you. And like you were mentioning earlier before we started, saying no to the things that don't fulfill you and trying to build things out of the things that do. And it's not easy and it's scary, but I love that physical. I think I've heard something similar, but you gave me the hard science. I love that. Making those connections is so key, but it's so hard, right? And I think anyone listening right now, give yourself that grace, give yourself that break of it's not easy. Just keep testing and trying and experimenting. So that's awesome. I love that you brought that science in because I can do this. Like I was just watching this video. It was really interesting. It was all about what makes you and ideas and what moves people from the YouTube channel Big Think. And it was essentially what you were saying about weaving is people don't have the capacity to do the big leaps, right? Your brain literally doesn't allow you to do the capacity to do the big leaps. And creatives have the ability to make those short leaps, right? Like they fill the gaps in between, right? For everyone else who cannot have those big leaps, creativity helps and creative people help fill those gaps and then get you there. And it was so amazing. And it was all about, changing perception, right? Like change your perception. And it was just such a powerful visual for me because that's what we call insight in marketing and advertising, right? Insight, my definition, there's a whole bunch of definitions and every strategist has one. But for me, it's a human truth that no one else can see and you can activate, right? That unto itself is creativity, right? Finding that is
and
creative.
it also sounds like a superpower.
Absolutely. And well, if you think about it, that's the responsibility of when we are in mass communications or mass conversations, as I like to call it now, there's so much responsibility into how to guide the conversation. And that's what we're hearing about all these damn companies. Like, you need to be responsible, right? If you want to be treated as a human being, if your brand is humanizing yourself, then you need to follow the rules of what makes a good human a good human. And then balancing that out is what the market chooses winners and losers. And hopefully, right, we can have the societal leaps that make sense, and we can have cultures built on, empathy and human stories. And honestly, like, it's not cheesy, but like just love the simplicity of positive energy guiding whatever that you're doing, whether in business, in life, relationships, or whatever that is. So a lot of these areas are coming together and informing and influencing things. It's just that a lot of us now have access to that information, where we're like, before everything was, select few had access to that, and were able to obviously monetize and build from these truths that are now democratized through social media and other forms of new media.
Oh my goodness. I could go into so many tangent conversations from this topic of, one, the art of communication and how that is an art that the thing about art is that it's different from person to person. And what makes art is that what I make,
or my art is never going to be the same as your art. Because when you're really tapping into like your own creative knowing, like your pops, you know, like he had the Caribbean blood, you know, and he probably just had the rhythm. Because I don't know about you, but I have about like a tenth of a percent in my DNA of African and Middle Eastern descent. And is this weirdest thing? Like if I listen to like Middle Eastern music, like I got the beat. When I listen to pour some sugar on me, I don't got the beat. You know, it's pretty crazy how it really does. I feel like a lot of it is got to be in your DNA in some way because come on. Now the body doesn't catch up quickly to the mind. So I'm also into like EDM and all this stuff. But again, is that thing about weaving all of those different things that only you carry, because what we put in our backpacks as little gifts from the gift shop of life are so different.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Yeah, it's really interesting. You know, the subjectivity conversation always comes up in our industry, and at least in my industry, is very interesting because my job, especially as I've transitioned into more leadership roles, is actually anchoring people in the fact that is art and business, right? Like, you are combining two worlds. And usually the creatives, like, they just want to make the arts, and usually the business people just want to make the business, and they don't really talk, right? That membrane that you were speaking of, oftentimes do not connect. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. I believe that it goes up to, you know, education systems, right? Like in a lot of like, you have a lot of creatives that, you know, are not taught how to speak business, and a lot of business people that are not taught to speak that. And I think people forget that subjectivity, it's important, it's key, it's what brings each piece of who we are into it. But what's interesting, at least in my space and what I do, is my role is to create objectivity and remind the room what it's all about, right? Remind the room that when we do art for ourselves, that's a different time than when we're building strategic solutions for the now of the business. So that piece it's really interesting. But managing those personalities, managing your bias, managing other people's bias, then becomes a different monster altogether, because you also cannot deplete people's input. You cannot deplete the artist. You cannot crush the artist's soul, but you also cannot jeopardize the business need, right? So that's something that is very, very intriguing, and why a lot of creative people struggle, because you're constantly in a predetermined, predesigned system that you're just trying to bring your all, and you're just trying to build something new for the world. But literally, like, you're speaking a foreign language to the other side. And it has been my goal through my whole career to bridge the two. And it's because of that music beginning, right? Like, making music in the garage, writing songs, coming up with melodies, you know, notepads of poetry, all of that takes one thing. But then once you're talking about going into a studio and tracking an album, and then once you have the album, packaging the album, like, at the end of the day, there's one fundamental thing, and I say this to my students all the time, like, our foundational state is that no one cares. And that sounds really blunt, but the truth of the matter is we're all trying to figure out our fucking day. Like, we're all trying to figure out our lives. So you're just trying to, right, just in our, you said, our DNA, like, we're just trying to exist, deal with that existence, and also like have some form of fulfillment. So yeah, like, our foundational state is like, no one gives a shit. But how can we get people to give a shit? How do we get people to care about something that they just don't know about yet, right? Like, that's why the role of the artist and the role of creativity is so important, because at the end of the day, it's tapping into humanity, which then for me and my own successes and struggles in the industry and life in general, once you realize that there's so many systems stacked, you know, for hundreds of years, are very much built against, you know, your likeness, or against or pro someone else's, then dealing with all of that math and all of that kind of like reality becomes the draining part of why you have burnout and why we have so many of us that were promised, right? Like I think about my abuelita, right? Like all of us grew up in a world where like if you go to college, you don't get a job, you get a career that you're gonna love forever, and you're gonna, you know, achieve anything you want. But no one was planning 2008 going to shit. Nobody was planning for, right, having two massive great recessions at once. Like those are the things that, you know, it hinders people's ability of like, well, I was promised this. That's the part that is really, really hard. I'm seeing so many people struggling, and I have been having to get out of my own way because of those learned behaviors and all those promises of like, well, I did all the right things and I'm not where I need to be, right? Everything seemed predetermined and everything was so optimistic, and then life hits you. But then I'm reminded about my great grandmothers and my great great grandparents and their struggles and what they lived. And that's the part for me, I believe, has kept me around and has kept me in a different perspective. Not just because they had it shittier, but because they got through it, right? Like, it's not that older people had it worse than you. It's learning how they were able to get through it. And, you know, for better or for worse, I'm so thankful that I was raised by my grandparents, because I feel like I was brought up with a different lens, a different filter for life and how to get through it. And it has been a grounding, centering reality that when I'm at my worst and I don't want to get out of bed and I feel like I have not accomplished enough, even though I'm living, you know, in a big ass house with 3 perfect, gorgeous kids and a spouse, right? So in comparison to my upbringing, I'm fucking miles beyond, you know, what it was, you know, provided to me, which I was incredibly thankful for. Still not feeling like I'm enough, and still not feeling like I've accomplished anything. And again, like I always say, like, you're a kid from an island in the middle of a fucking ocean, right? Like that's, you know, and I think about where I came up, the stories of my grandmother, the stories of my great grandmother, and try to find, you know, that strength to get through. And I think that that's a key part of being where we are, where so many people just want to express themselves and be creative and just share their truth and keep feeling like they're not accomplishing something. But it's like you're measuring yourself, like you're measuring yourself with a different ruler, right? Like you're measuring yourself with it, you know, like you're on the English and they're on the fucking metric. Like consolidating those worlds, it's, I think, going to be, I believe it's going to be honestly the next 20 years for a lot of us. You know what I mean? Like just realizing the world changed. What was promised was, you know, was optimism, not, you know, not a contract. And it's time for us to then write, you know, our next chapter. It's time for us to understand, right? It's time for us to understand that there's generations on our shoulders now, and we are going to break some of those habits, and we are responsible. I just saw it last night, and one of my best friends sent it to me, right? Like, we are the ancestors, whether we realize it or not, right? Like, I'm in legacy mode, right? Like, I'm in that legacy mode.
We are the ones we've been waiting for.
Yeah,
We are
that's
the revolution.
That's the one. That's the
Yes.
one. So I'm hoping that we're able to do this as a society, American, Latin, you know, global. There's so much growth to be done, and you know, hopefully this type of conversations, you know, help people get a little bit closer to their kind of like balanced state, if you will.
Well, it definitely helps me. So thank you so much for being here. And man, so amazing. I want to share what came up for me, because when I hear you talk about these two worlds that we're trying to consolidate in this system that has been teaching us how to do things And I feel like it's kind of like when I am relying on, oh, I go home and then my partner or my mom or my brother or my roommate is just going to have food ready for me. So I'm not going to put any thought into how I'm going to feed myself today because that's just kind of taken care of. And that's cool. But when my roommate doesn't know or doesn't care that I'm lactose intolerant and they love dairy and milk, then I am paying by with that laziness, you know, because I'm like, oh, whatever. Well, this is just easier. It's just here. And then in the meantime, I have all this like money that I can go use to buy all these other things to distract myself with. At least that's my experience.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I was kind of telling you about my story going through being medical school or nursing school and then going into an MBA and then just crash landing into I am an artist and this is what I'm going to do because otherwise I'm going to die. I have to like be on like follow my truth. And I was in a really dark place for a really long time. So I picked up all of the history books that I could. And I was just really trying to understand creativity because it was like the biggest relationship that I've ever had was with my creativity. And in business school, they teach you like, what is your core skill? Because your core skill is what you monetize and you do not outsource your core competencies. So I'm like, oh, fuck, what's my core competency? I'm shit at math. So I thought I was doomed because I was shit at math.
Mm-hmm.
So when I found creativity, I was like, great, what the fuck am I going to do with this? You know, like Hollywood. And then it started with the easy part, right? America commercializes and horse out, let's call it, in the media, everything. And creativity in America has been, excuse my French, but hoard out by Hollywood. Oh no, you want this guy to take your picture and you want to look like this. And I mean, like all of these looks are curated, fashion, even what you're eating is like, oh, are you drinking Capri Sun, cool color, like whatever the F, like, oh my God. And then there's also that media. I grew up in Mexico and I thought it was crazy watching all of these American high school kid movies. I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like, that's like a telenovela, but these motherfuckers are like 16 and like 15. Like, that's some weird shit. But also, it sounded like so exciting. You know, they had cars and they're going on trips to Cabo. Like, I'm next to Cabo and my parents never take me there. Like, what's going on? Spring break? I want some of that. Anyway, it's so seductive.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, I was like, well, what the fuck? Where do I fit here? Because like, I'm not going to become Brad Pitt now. Like, I'm 36. What the fuck am I going to do now? So I started digging into history books and I read about the Industrial Revolution and the Renaissance. And the Renaissance was when the industrial people or the people that build the system embrace creatives and we're like, oh, yes, let me feed you, come into my house and take care of you. And now all you have to do is, you know, tap into your creativity, be into the flow, create, and I'll just, you know, take all of your work and sell it and create this market and build art galleries and make things that even though there's everyone's an artist, they make it seem like, no, the only real art that is worth a shit is the one that I'm selling you for whatever at my price. You know, that's my taste that I curated for you. It's a total fucking power move. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel like that's when the system really started disconnecting creativity because they disconnected us from like that. Oh, I have the ability to caretake for myself and really do anything that I want, not just one thing. One. And two, Industrial Revolution. They don't need creative people in a factory by then. They just needed somebody to have a body and move the shit from one place to the other. Like, there's still like, even though we have robots and Amazon and all that stuff, like there's a ton of people that are living that kind of life. And schools, like you said, have been training people to, hey, here's the industrial recipe for everything. Pick out of this menu and go. Like you said, don't worry. At the end of this pile of shit, I mean, rainbow, you're going to find American Express, Visa, MasterCard, Urban Outfitters, Gucci, Louis Vuitton, trips to Thailand, whatever. Like, you can get everything. And then we work until we're 50 and it's like, oh, now I tap into all of this. And it's like, no, Now you're sick. Now you're dying. You have fucking cancer and you're stressing about the world. Oh, and coronavirus. What the fuck?
Yeah, I mean, I love one of my favorite quotes. It's been attributed to a couple different people, but history rhymes. It's one of my favorite things, and you can do a lot of things with that. You can acknowledge it, you can ignore it, or you can activate it. And for me, if history rhymes, then it's our responsibility to know where in that cycle we are, and how we react to continue a similar path or to change that path, right? And yes, there's a lot of, when we speak about systems, I think people either like say you're insane, you're whatever, because they don't understand that they're part of something bigger. Especially right in the American like freedom conversations, which even that word has shifted its meaning for so long. The people don't understand that when we talk about systems is dominance versus non-dominance, right? I think like the word choices that we'll use moving forward is going to be key, because someone has to create that system, right? So like you were using the example of creating an art market. As much as we say that the market is made by people, we forget that there's brokers that are the actual beneficiaries of said markets, right? And people don't know that. People just know, you just saw coronavirus. Like, it's so hilarious to me because I'm not going to get too much, but like obviously the conspiracy theories. I live in the Bible Belt. I live in Central Florida. Unfortunately, I'm still trying to cope and deal with like my own closest people just falling off the bandwagon. And I'm literally like staring at them going, you are anti-science, talking shit on social media with a supercomputer that you paid $1,200 for in the palm of your hand, sending signals to satellites orbiting around Earth, all made by fucking findings of theoretical physicists for the last 100 years. So it's just kind of comical to me because we're so adaptive in the comfort of systems that we don't even realize we're in it, right? We're just living, right? And that piece, it's obviously we could probably have a whole show around that, but that piece is a little bit tricky because what I would encourage people to think about is, are you in a dominant position or are you in a non-dominant position? Because I guarantee you, when you hear the loudest noise is when you are and see and have groups that are non-dominant, right? It made a lot of sense for women when the suffrage movement was going on, because everyone looked around and realized, oh shit, I'm not alone in this feeling, right? So then all of a sudden people come together, blah, blah, blah. But then it's ironic that people are using that freedom that their ancestors provided for them not that long ago, right, to oppress other people. So it's one of those things where like, and I just had this conversation with one of my just brilliant fucking minds, Vanessa Toro, shout out, much love to her. The irony, right? The irony of, do people want diversity, equity, and inclusion, or do they want their own version of dominance? That is something that I think a lot of people are not being fucking real about. They're not being honest. Understanding equality and belonging does not mean you not being the top dog and fuck the rest, right? And that's why hustle culture for me, it's a struggling, like I use that word, but that's why for me, it's a little bit tough, because I understand that rankings are real. I understand that we respond to lists easier. I understand there's going to be winners and losers. I'm not saying I'm some perfect fucking human being. You're going to have winners and losers, and that is an unfortunate reality of life. For every positive energy, there is a negative energy. I understand all those things, but I think it is very interesting because we're using the wrong words, and I think people are getting lost in their own minutia of what affects them, not realizing that they're really not after some kind of greater, everyone can coexist and be, but really like, I want that shit, right? So we're actually very primal. We actually like, we revert back to very, very primal behaviors, but we don't realize it, right? We don't realize what the fuck we're doing. And that unto itself is very much a systemic reality that people who really have and wield power, right? The people who have the resources, the finances, and the infrastructure can always count on, right? Like, as long as these people are over here having, like, I mean, we can talk about wars all day, same shit. As long as these two people are fighting, right? That person, that you know what I'm saying, like that broker that you were talking about with the art, it's actually making more money because now he's selling that art piece to the three highest bidders while all these people keep fighting, and then three of those people are the artists that are, you know, taken care of by the Vatican during the Renaissance. So yeah, this shit gets very complex as far as how our humanity and how our nature gets in the way of how we interact. I think my hope, it always is the power of togetherness. I think that, you know, I have a friend of mine who always gives me shit because, you know, he think I expect a lot from people, and you know, the classic, you know, people let you down. And we had this really great conversation that I'm like, it's not about having hope in people as much as having hope in humanity, right? If you look at history, during the worst times, yeah, this past year has been shit, but during the worst times in our written history, there is always that group that gets us through. There is always the group that comes together, and we have a resilience and an understanding of togetherness, right? Now, once we kind of like get through it, we tend to then break off into factions. But to that, I say that it's the cycle of life. That is what happens until another, you know, bigger tribe gets in the way, right? That's how empires have existed all along. It's just that social media changed the ability to create new tribes, to find different people. And it seems messier, but in reality, it's just more of the same shit. It just looks different, right? We don't have the tablets and the temples. We have Facebook groups and fucking DMs, right? Like that's the difference. The difference in our current experience and our current kind of output of what's happening collectively.
I love that you're bringing up social media again, because something you said earlier reminded me of this quote that I love. This really famous American philosopher called Spider-Man: with great power comes great responsibility.
Of course. Stan Lee.
And this is the thing with the social media, like we all have this platform, and maybe you think like, oh, I only have like 1,000 followers and they're mostly like my family and friends, but it's like you're still, whatever you're posting out there is reaching them. Are you going to be posting something shallow, which you can, like, I am not, look, I'm like fixing my hair and I'm not even thinking about it, so unconsciously, you know, I'm like worried about shallow things. It's totally normal. Like you said, we're human, like we have a primal nature, period. Acknowledge that. Through love, everything is possible, including living with that primal, like, I'll effing kill you if you do whatever, you know, or I will, whatever. I mean, I'm a super aggressive person, so I always use the I'll effing kill you, because when I was young, anybody would bother me, and in my head, it was like the first thing, you know, it's like, I'll kill you. And I'm like, am I going to kill anyone? Like, I mean, I could, but I'm not going to. And offering, like you said earlier, grace to that side of myself, that fucking savage, is really important, because that savage comes out whenever it feels like I'm not making enough money, or I'm not taking my job seriously, or whatever. So important to do that. But social media, you're putting out whatever vibration out to your tribe, really, like the people who follow you are going to see this. So with my work, I love to remind people we're all creative. we're all wielding this magic superpower of creativity, and none of anybody's creativity, the creative superpower, is going to look the same, because again, we are a weaving of all of these little things, like our ancestors, our genes, like everything that calls to us throughout our whole lives, our experiences, our thoughts. So it is a great responsibility to sit in truth with all of that, acknowledge it, have the grace to love the whole fucking thing, and then the courage and determination, resilience, really, to sit with it and make a fucking quilt with all of that. And the cool thing about this quilt is that it's not a quilt that you just get to use throughout your life. It's like you were saying, a quilt that you leave to the next generation. And because of social media, and because our reach is no longer just like our family, tribe, or unit, which, you know, before probably was like under 100 people or something like that, now you're reaching people all over the world. So you should, or not you, I feel like I need to take this even more seriously, because do I want to add more bullshit to the world, or do I want to add more of the shit that I love? And through my work with creativity, my mission is to help people bridge their dreams and their fears, because that's building a bridge between those two. Like, that's how you live. Like, that's life. It's the bridge that you build between those two. Period.
That's what I call, that distance is where purpose lives, right? That's where and it's key. You know, my mentor and I were having a back and forth. I love this guy. He's like, we're always pushing each other. And sometimes, you know, it's just a matter of, I love to exercise empathy by looking at things in different ways. And I'm not talking about devil's advocate, because that's usually meaningless, you know, just want to be heard, but real empathy, right? Like reading a story and thinking about it through the lens of the villain, then you read it again through the lens of, you know, the victim, and then through the hero. Same thing. We were talking about, again, social media's role, and, you know, the rise of TikTok and all this stuff. And I'm like, my argument, you know, to him was that it's the same shit. It's just that we now have, it's now recorded history, right? Like, if you think about when Jackass was coming up, and we're the same age, so we experienced, you know, a lot of the same media. When Jackass was coming up, there were a lot of idiots doing Jackass stunts, right? There was a lot of kids getting hurt. There was a lot of things. But what was brilliant about that conversation, and I completely, you know, understood from it, is that you may have had one or two kids in that barrio, right, with a video camera and maybe like a cassette. So like distribution was like the 20, 30 little pendejos who were like hanging out, and like, you know, they were like, just it was contained. The amplification of things and algorithms' ability to completely balloon something, that's the part that is new. And that's the part that we just fundamentally do not know how to manage, right? We're talking about creativity and the ability, the distance of like those gaps keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and technology, amplification, innovation, it's getting, right? If you think about, you know, it's getting so fast that our biology is struggling to keep up, which is why you see so much, you know, regression. You have so many people just going back to the cave, right? But have there always been morons doing stupid things? Absolutely. Have there always been X, Y, Z? There's always been everything. I think that this amplification is the part that changes. And I've had a whole career of successes because of it, because I was early on in the space, and I knew what, you know, I knew that it was not about mass communication anymore. It wasn't just messages, it was conversations, it was back and forth. Like, I was able to build a really, honestly, great career understanding that. But now it's this full circle moment of it's starting to kind of run out of the rails, right? We've seen what happened in politics in the last, the last, decade, from, again, Obama tapping into social media's power all the way to, Trumpian years. And now it's actually even getting more aggressive, because now the digital warriors are, going to the streets, right? We saw what happened in January of this year. But here's the thing is, that already happened with Papyrus. Those uprisings already happened. We have just history upon history upon history upon history of rebellions, revolutions, right? If you think about, the evolution of church, the evolution of the Protestant movement, the evolution of revolutions, all being attributed to the printing press, for example. So I feel like that's the piece. Like, for me, again, that's the anchoring. I anchor myself in history. History rhymes. All this shit has happened before, and it will happen again. How do we help people navigate, right? Immediately, how do we help our family, our kids, our moms, our parents, our siblings? How do we help, our immediate tribe navigate? But if we do have platforms, if we have built things, how do we help other people navigate through these times, right? Anchored in the precedent of the past, right? In the precedent of history, and again, trusting that the greatness in humanity will ultimately.
How do we do it?
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, for me, it's very much an exercise in mindfulness. My stepmom gave that word to me and really encouraged me and challenged me to understand mindfulness. And someone who has anxiety and depression, my uncle told me this. I've never heard it broken down like this. So if you know this, I'm sorry, world, but anxiety, depression keeps you in the past, and anxiety keeps you, afraid of the future. So what happens is, when you have those two things, like someone like myself who has been struggling with this shit for so long, is that you literally do not know how to be in the eternal now. You literally cannot just appreciate that you are a human being across the fucking country. We're having this conversation, right? Like, I'm in this safe space. I have my shelter. I have my, my food. I have a healthy family. And not being able to do that, it's fucking it's the craziest shit. But it's literally the majority of my adult story. Always being so concerned about a 10-year plan, and I cannot fucking enjoy now. Right? So in the last 3-4 years, it has literally been an intentional exercise in looking down at your feet and just appreciate, right? And that's why faith is so important, because that has been the job of faith, not religion. That's not going to touch that one in this episode. But that has been the rituals of prayer, from the Sumerians all the way to today, right? The rituals of going to temple, right? Those were exercises in mindfulness, right? Right now, if you have an altar of stones, if you have, candles, whatever that is, those were all important parts to being mindful. It forces you to do now. Meditation, it forces you to be in the now. Flow states, right? Literally, it forces you to be in the now, and then tap into those places and all the chemical, incredible chemical things that happen in our body, trigger and do their thing. That's the piece that I'm hoping, through my writing and my journey and my experiences, I can give back to the ones coming behind me, and the people who are by me or in front of me still struggling. It's not easy. I don't have it solved, but I know that I have found success. It's funny. I've always spoken about balance and strength. I developed this crazy theory when I was in my early 20s about balance. And I used to say, it was very simple. If you look at the atom, right? The atom, you have a proton and the neutron sitting in the middle, right? They're both together. And then you have electrons flying at all types of fucking speeds on the outside, right? If you just talk about energy, So you have positive energy and neutral energy, right? Perfect balance with negative energy, always, always, always flying around you. Now, why is this important? The only way that molecules change and become other things is when you have exchanges in electrons. It takes negative shit to find each other for things to change and become something else, right? This is written in what makes everything, right? So that's the piece you have to like stop and think about. This shit is written in the basis of everything. But I always found incredibly beautiful that the positive charge and the balanced charge are in the middle at the core. They're having to be together, right? So I realized, and that's the piece when I get the most lost and depressed and gone, like I think about that. It is written in everything. And you can see it in the biggest ways when you look into the cosmos. And again, you can go down to the atomic level. And if you think about every story, every creative story, every imagination that we have developed about what God means, about religions, about different things, that's the whole notion of you get through balance, through positivity. It's written in our code, right? And that's something that anchors me. So I've always spoken about balance is strength. I have fucking songs, literally, pondera es vires, balance is strength. I have, that's Latin for balance is strength, according to Google. And it's an interesting part because it's very easy to understand something. But put it into practice is the shit, right? That's the thing that is so hard because you have to allow yourself to go through it, right? So if you think about going back to the social media example, if we're so fucking concerned about the likes and the comments and the things, it takes away from enjoying making it in the first place, right? So those are the parts. The biggest shift and changes in growth moments that have happened to me is by understanding that, grounding myself in that, and trying my best to practice, right? Last summer, I took a training with the 4A's MAIP, incredible organizations that I've been a part of since 2010. I've never heard about this, and it's such a simple concept. There's different stresses, right? There's different levels of stress. There is like your dog ate the toilet paper stress, and you just lost your mother stress, right? Like those are two different types of stresses. And every type of stress has a type of recovery. I had never heard that in my fucking life, right? And if you practice mindfulness and you find what that recovery is for that stress, you're able to manage your day a lot better. Right? So a light stress day, I realized that the reason I love cooking so much is because you have to be mindful. If I'm not in the moment cutting that onion, my fingers are gone, right? If I'm not in the moment making sure that that meal gets done, it's burnt and my family doesn't eat. Now, when I'm having a full-blown episode and I like get to that ugly, human, like animalistic place, now I know that I have to take the trip, that I have to leave. I got to find a place in nature. That's a different type of recovery, right? There's a difference between me making a meal and banging my drums for an hour, right? Different recoveries for different stresses, but really it's all an exercise in practicing mindfulness and forcing yourself to just be here and then allowing your head to fucking go somewhere else. And again, I want to say, this is work. You have to do the work. It's not me talking shit like I'm some wise person. I'm sharing my literal struggle, right? Like that's what I'm constantly trying to struggle and work towards. And yesterday was a prime example of fuck it all. My wife is off from work and I'm going to go. And yesterday was about my wife and my kids. And yes, I threw up the beautiful pictures because I love them. And I do have people, like you said, that fundamentally care about you and wonder about you. And I have family members, right? Like absolutely share some of those highlights. But I think you also know that when I am in a straight up, shit day, I'm also speaking about it and sharing the struggles because I'm trying, right? My goal is to be as honest and transparent as I can with people. Doesn't mean that I drop everything under the sun, but I am trying to be honest with people, because I know that for every beautiful beach shot, there's a horrible day that you don't want to shower or get out of the fucking bed, right? And that's kind of like, that's my truth. Yes, it has become a brand, if you will, right? Because of the colors and the decisions that you see. But really, I'm comfortable in saying, like, I have my personal filters, and I'm able to share my truths and beliefs and behaviors and give that to the world, and feel good about living my life, but also bringing people along who tell me, holy shit, this was so meaningful, or wow, your wife looks beautiful, whatever that is. Because we have more access to a bigger, more beautiful tribe and a community. And I want to be able to have that. I love that. I can still be connected with my San Francisco friends, LA friends, Puerto Rico family, and have a sense of belonging, because ultimately that's what the fuck we're hungry for. We just want to feel like we belong somewhere in this world. And I promise, if someone listening to this is suffering to depression, like, that's the fucking feeling. You belong nowhere. This world will be better without you. And I've been there, and I don't fucking like it, period. I don't like it. So hopefully, people can take some of these practices and start implementing the small, right, new habits, and implementing small little changes that then become full-blown behaviors, and then becomes a completely different way of living.
Hell yeah. And don't give up on yourself, because that is where the magic happens. Remember to crawl, walk, and run. We've had a lifetime of being conditioned to just be like, oh, the system will take care of me. Like, oh, I got, it's okay. I have diabetes type 2, but instead of doing the work, I could just take this pill and it will take care of me. It's owning your sovereignty, or however you say that, just owning yourself. And when you say when you're depressed, and I've had 2 times where I really highly considered ending my life. So I really do empathize with you on visiting that place. And yeah, I don't like it either. But the one thing is that I've learned through love, everything is possible. And not only getting myself out of that dark space by sitting there with that person that needs to feel that. Because again, going back to natures and cycles and creativity, light and dark, life and death, we create and we have to destroy some things, and that applies to us as well. And a lot of the times I found myself in deep grief was because I was honoring something I loved. And that's something we don't think about. Love is amazing, but love is accompanied by grief. And if I had to pay the price in grief for feeling that love, like, I would happily take it any day, and recommend that anybody does it as well. And again, you always belong to yourself if you're listening. That self-love, be mindful about the way you talk to yourself, be mindful about you, and then you can start seeing how it just starts paying off with dividends.
True.
Hell yeah. Brother, I feel like we need to do like a whole series on different topics, because I literally just wrote so many notes, but gotta be respectful of the time.
No worries. Yeah, for sure. We can always do a part 2 later on.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for being who you are and doing what you do in the way you're doing it, because I feel like what you're doing is healing and empowering people's ability to communicate who they are and what they're about, what they love, with value. And I know personally for myself, that's been a very long journey, because systems and words can be a tricky place to navigate. especially like you said, if you're not coming from an empowered point of view. So thank you for doing that work.
Oh, and thank you so much. I've been looking forward to connecting with you and to have this time and space for us to just kind of be real and honest. Really happy with everything that you're putting out on your ends and like, empowering communities that usually are not being empowered, and for living your truth. Really, like, we hear that shit all the time, but I don't think people understand what the fuck it means. And hopefully after this conversation, you can get, a step closer. You said it several times. Everyone's, singularity, everyone's ability, everyone's special sauce, whatever name you want to give it, it's your own, right? It's special because it's your own, which makes it different than everywhere else. How you mold and how you activate is where the outcomes then end up being, right? It's where the outcomes are different for everyone. But I'm definitely super grateful for your time, for inviting me over, and for everything that you're doing. Really, I love your platforms. Keep doing you. I'm really happy to learn about your story and your struggles and how you are in a place where you're pursuing the fire inside, and everyone else pursue that fire inside. And if you get stuck, reach out for help, right? Like, there are other people in different parts of their journey who can help you. And that's why they're professionals in different areas. They just have the ability, the experience, or at least the right questions to help you get through things. So, reach out to us when you need something. Look into your own network and your own family and your own spaces. And if you feel like you're stuck, tap into outside sources and outside energies that can help you keep moving. So again, thank you so much. I'm so blessed to be here. It's been lovely.
Thank you so much. I receive all the love and sending you so much right back.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Mindfully Curious podcast. Again, my name is Steph, and I am so grateful for you and for this life, for all that we get to create and experience. Next week, I will share my reflection on this third season of Mindfully Curious, or MF Curious. During the break, I will be working on perhaps rebranding the podcast in a way, but nothing too serious. And in the meantime, I plan on publishing a bunch of special episodes called Anonymous Book Club. And those will just be solo casts of me sharing my favorite parts of my favorite books that I am reading at the time. I'm really looking forward to that because I love that I could have a library available with me at all times of my favorite quotes from my favorite books. And the fact that I can share that with all of y'all is just amazing, and a great example of how technology really does or can unlock the world of abundance when used mindfully. Yep. And I just want to give a shout out to my girl Erica and Andrea from Sada Collective. We've been on this ride for 2 seasons now, and I love you both, and I am excited to see what other magic we get to co-create as life continues to roll forward. All right, everybody. Big MF love.